Hello class, my name is Addison McIntosh and I will be analyzing the CO2 analyzer and automatic control industry for the commercial greenhouse production industry. So a little bit about the infrared CO2 gas analyzers and controls is they analyze the carbon dioxide levels and control the climate of the greenhouses due to the increase or decreases in the carbon dioxide levels. They use infrared sensors to detect carbon dioxide levels, and this is a vital precision agriculture product in the commercial greenhouse market because increases in carbon dioxide levels can actually be toxic to humans and plants. So addressing and analyzing the CO2 levels is very important in making sure that you have optimal growing conditions and optimal yields in greenhouses. Addressing pricing and internal rivalry. The prices for CO2 analyzer and automatic controllers can vary anywhere from $150 to $3,000. These prices depend on the features, the capabilities, and the producer that's providing these products. This wide variety of pricing actually adds to the strength of internal rivalry as consumers can switch the product that is of lower cost and of better value to them. In terms of sticky pricing within this industry, sticky prices are prices that do not change quickly to economic conditions. So I wanted to address the COVID-19 economic crisis for non-dispersive infrared sensors, which is a vital aspect of carbon dioxide analyzer and controllers. So COVID-19 had a decline in GDP in countries all around the world. There was actually a decline in the NDIR market. So low dispensable income to be able to spend on precision agriculture technologies such as carbon dioxide analyzers and controllers actually decreased the demand. So therefore there was lowering prices and demand for CO2 analyzers and controls. However, it is such a vital part of such a large industry of commercial greenhouse production. Therefore, they were sticky, but very minimally. There's a large concentration of purveyors in the CO2 analyzer and automatic controller industry. This large number of purveyors increases the strength of competitive forces and internal rivalry. There's also a wide differentiation of products. This creates strong brand loyalty. This actually decreases internal rivalry as firms would actually like to take consumers who don't already have loyalty and build their own loyalty. So the wide differentiation actually decreases internal rivalry. Internal rivalry overall is very high in this industry. It is actually the strongest competitive force in this industry because there is such a high force coming from pricing and the number of purveyors in the industry. However, there is a low force coming from the high differentiation among products. However, it's very minimal compared to the other forces. Threat of entry, we have to address the industry attractiveness of the global commercial greenhouse market. So that market is expected to grow by $21 billion in just 4 years. Therefore, there is an increased competitive force coming from new entrants as more new entrants will want to reap the benefits of this growing industry. So having the ability to create an economy of scale is a very large entry barrier and decreases the threat of new entrants. However, it is actually difficult to achieve economies of scale in the specific industry because there's very highly technical, highly expensive products that are in CO2 analyzer and controllers, such as data centers, and infrared sensors are very expensive and highly technical. Therefore, the lack of ability to create economies of scale decreases the force, or actually, excuse me, increases the force of new entrants because there is no economies of scale. Government interaction. So an example of government interaction is the Bureau of Industry and Security issued a statement in October 12th of 2016 that increased the regulation of infrared technology to, in their words, protect the American interest within this technology. Well, that just showcases that the government is interested in such a vital part of the CO2 analyzer and controller industry. Therefore, that high government regulation creates a barrier of entry of new entrants, therefore decreases the threat of new entrants to existing purveyors. Overall, the threat of entry is medium. There's a high threat from the great industry outlook and low economy of scale ability, but however, the government interaction actually decreases the threat of entry. competition force. Threat of substitutes. So CO2 analyzers and controls serve a very specific purpose. They're automatically controlling climate conditions in greenhouses. And without CO2 controllers, you put your human laborers and plants at risk of toxic environments. Therefore, because it's such a specific purpose that they serve, there's a low concentration of substitutes. So there's no clear substitute in use. However, in doing research, I found that planting slow-growing mushrooms can enrich and control CO2 environments in greenhouses. However, this substitute in use is very costly and labor-intensive. Therefore, it is a very low threat in terms of CO2 analyzer and control producers. Economic substitutes are products that interact within the same market but serve a different function. So products, for example, these are products that can control a multitude of climate conditions like oxygen and temperature. So these products achieve and actually exceed the functions of CO2 analyzers and controls. Therefore, they put kind of a large threat to earn profits of just CO2 analyzer and controllers in their industry, because they're adding value to consumers that CO2 analyzers and controls aren't able to meet. Geographic substitutes are the same product, but they interact with different markets. So industries that use CO2 analyzer and controls are mining, HVAC, and landfill industry, basically just in terms of analyzing the CO2 levels to make sure that everybody interacting is safe and healthy. However, these products within these industries pose very low threats to the CO2 analyzers and controls within the commercial greenhouse industry, because they're not taking away profits from the greenhouse market per se. So threat of substitutes overall is very low. There's a low threat coming from concentrations of substitutes because there isn't a lot. There's low threats coming from substitutes in use because in reality there are none, except for traditional agriculture practices, but they're very labor intensive and costly. So very low threat coming there. There's a low threat coming from geographic substitutes because the presence of geographic substitutes does not take away the profit earning ability of the CO2 analyzer and controls in the greenhouse industry. However, there is a high threat coming from economic substitutes because they are able to meet and even exceed the functions of just CO2 analyzer and controls in the greenhouse market. Supplier power, we had to address the concentrations of suppliers. So there's two aspects to CO2 analyzers and controls that we need to address. So there's a very highly technical, highly differentiated supplies like infrared sensors and data collectors. So these suppliers actually have a high supply power and pricing power, as this product is vital to CO2 analyzers and controls. However, the other part of these products are the commodity-like supplies. So like metal, wiring, and plastic, these are very homogeneous and there's many suppliers in the market. So these commodity-like suppliers are actually price takers and have very little supplier power in the market. The heavy differentiation of the highly technical aspects, so like the infrared and the data collectors, actually negatively affect the firm's abilities to make profits. So they actually add a higher supplier power threat because the infrared sensors can vary in quality and capability and add more value depending on what the producer is and the technological capabilities. The cost of switching suppliers. So for the more technical and highly differentiated products, there are high switching costs. Therefore, it adds a little bit more power to suppliers, but there's low switching costs for the commodity like supplies because there's no opportunity for pricing premium because they're commodity like. Therefore, the interaction between the two create a medium threat to generate profits in the industry. Forward integration in the CO2 analyzer and control industry would entail suppliers of the products would sell directly to producers of CO2 analyzers and controls. So they would cut out the distribution outlet. This could be high for like the technical supplies, like the infrared sensors. Instead of selling to a distribution outlet, they sell directly to the producers. So the threat of forward integration can increase the supplier power within the industry. So overall, the supplier power is mixed and medium. So there's a very high supplier power and pricing power given to the differentiated and technical supplies. However, there's a low supplier power coming from suppliers of the commodity-like supplies. The buyer power, so we have to understand the market and the demand. So the market is $29.6 billion as of right now. So this large market equates to a large demand for essential products like CO2 analyzer and controls. Because there's a large demand, this actually decreases the buyer power within the market. In fact, this creates a seller's market as opposed to a buyer's market. The concentration of the buyers, like I just mentioned, there's a lot of buyers because this industry is expected to grow and is so large. And as more greenhouses begin and buyers begin to enter in the market, it's going to increase the concentration of buyers. Therefore, this creates a weak competitive force for buyers in the industry. So the finished products are actually heavily differentiated in this market. Their qualities vary widely. There's major differences. Because this heavy differentiation, there's no ability for buyers to have bargaining power like they would with like commodity prices, commodity supplies that are very homogeneous. This decreases the buyer power in the CO2 analyzer and control industry. So backward integration in the CO2 industry would entail buyers to buy firms to produce directly to them. Producers of CO2 analyzers and controllers should supply directly to them. This is a form of vertical integration that would add value to the support activities in the value chain. This threat is actually pretty plausible as the commercial greenhouse market is increased. Therefore, the threat increases the buyer power within the industry. Buyer power overall, the threat from buyer power is low. There's low for buyer power from high demand, high concentration of buyers, and the heavy differentiation of finished products. There's high buyer power from the threat of forward integration, however. For strategic recommendation, we have to understand their current strategy. So right now, from firms, they're in the CO2 analyzer and control industry, they're doing a focused differentiation. They're focused on one niche market, the commercial greenhouse market, and producing a wide variety of products and customization to this market. This is very effective in precision agriculture, which the goal is to solve specific problems with precision, like climate control and greenhouses. So first we need to understand macro environments and economic conditions. So considerations for the GDP of buying countries. So having a higher GDP means that they have higher disposable incomes in firms in that country. We also need to understand the appreciation of currencies of buying and supplying countries to understand cost and therefore profits. So integrating forecasting of global economic conditions is vital into business strategy in this industry. Government influences would involve like trading tariffs and regulation. So this would affect the ability to reach new buyers and suppliers around the world as governments impose or deregulate their trading tariffs. So staying competitive means understanding these regulations within the industry and adapting their strategy towards these regulations. As more technology becomes more precise and more advanced, integrating and adopting their business strategy to either adopt or overcome these technical advances is vital in staying competitive in such a competitive industry like CO2 analyzer and controls. So environmental and socioeconomic forces basically come down to there's going to be a large generation of demand because environmental conditions are going to change and socioeconomic forces are consumers are going to want more alternative agriculture methods. So addressing the increase in demand is important to stay competitive in the industry. So from the macro and the microeconomic challenges that were discussed, I believe that CO2 analyzer and control industry should provide the best cost provider strategic strategy. So not only producing lower cost products by creating different additions in the value chain so consumers don't take pricing burden, but also differentiating, customizing your product to a niche market so you can add value is vital in staying competitive in the industry, especially in such a competitive one like CO2 and gas analyzers. Thank you so much for your time.